Hello sweet friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Kaitlin and I am so glad that you are here today for my May wrap up. So I'm keeping it super casual today because I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, to be completely honest. So I got COVID a couple of weeks ago, and I just feel like it's put me really behind with like household chores, and then also like all the content that I had in store for the channel. So I'm just trying not to put too much pressure on myself, and these next few videos are probably going to be pretty casual, nothing super fancy. Not that I do super fancy stuff at this point, but anyways, so just thank you guys for bearing with me and for giving me grace. I will catch up and we will get back to regular scheduled programming. Without further ado, let's get into all the books that I read in May. Okay, so in May, I read 2 manga, 3 mystery/thrillers, 4 romances, and 1 fantasy romance, and then I DNF'd 2 books. So we will talk about all of those in their respective categories, and I'm going to start with manga. So like I said, the week that I had COVID, I read a lot of these because I didn't do pretty much anything else. If I wasn't reading, I was pretty much sleeping. So I was actually able to get through a few books that week, and 2 of them were actually manga. And manga is really great whenever you are sick because it's kind of like low commitment and easy to fly through, and just kind of doesn't take up quite as much brain power, I feel like, whenever you're not feeling well. So I did finish 2 manga during that week. They both actually were gifts to me from sweet friends of mine that they sent to me as well wishes. So thank you all so much who sent me books that week. But the first one that I got through that week was Spy Family. And this is the first in the series. My good friend Olivia, she sent this to me and it was so much fun. This series follows a guy named Twilight, and he is actually a spy, and he gets tasked with a very specific mission. This mission actually requires him to have a child and a wife to complete his identity. And so he sets out to find a kid first. And so he goes to an orphanage and he ends up adopting this little girl, Anya, and she actually is a telepath. She is the cutest character. I absolutely adore her. She probably is my favorite character in the family. He ends up running into this girl at a seamstress shop, and the girl is an assassin, and they kind of hit it off, and he doesn't know that she's an assassin and she doesn't know that he's a spy, but they kind of hit it off, and for their own reasons they end up getting together, and it was just such a fun time. I am so looking forward to diving into the second one in this series. And the second manga that I finished that week was from my sweet friend Lauren, and she sent me A Sign of Affection, and this is the first one in the series as well. I actually had never read a shoujo manga, which, if you're not super familiar with manga, there's kind of different, not genres, but categories. From what I understand, shoujo is like geared towards young adult and adult women, so they're typically like love stories, and they're just more marketed towards that demographic. And this was my first shoujo, and I really enjoyed it. This book follows our main protagonist. I'm not going to try to say her name because I know I will butcher it. She is deaf, and she's a college student, and she's on the train one day whenever this stranger comes up to her and starts talking to her, and of course she can't hear him. And this other guy steps in to kind of help her navigate the situation. He steps in and he kind of saves the moment, and she realizes that he actually goes to the same college as her. This first book is her getting up the courage to ask for his number and ask him out, and it was so much fun. It was such a sweet start to a really cute romance, I think. So like I said, I'm excited to pick up the second one, and if you've been looking to maybe pick up a shoujo manga or like a romance manga, I think this is a really good place to start from what I know. There's a couple others that are on my list to get to coming up, and so I'm excited to share more about that specific category here soon. So I feel like that's a pretty good segue into the romance category for May, since that was a romance manga. And the first romance that I finished this month was The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. And this book was so much fun. I feel like I say that all the time, that phrase, so much fun. But I don't know, reading's fun. This book follows our main protagonist. What is her name? Am I the only one who like never can remember names? Like the minute I'm done with the book, it like just flies out of my head. I remember loving that book, but I could not tell you the names of the characters. But anyways, this follows our main protagonist, Cecilia, and she is part of a society of scoundrels, a society of thieves, and her aunt are part of this. And she ends up one day finding out that there's somebody who's been hired to assassinate her. And the assassin, Ned, ends up kind of developing a crush on her, and she of course has instant attraction to him, but they're kind of enemies at first. Whenever they find a common ground, a common enemy, and they decide to pair up to save the Wisteria Society, who actually gets kidnapped by this mutual enemy. And this book was so full of wit. If you are a fan of like British wit, British humor, you will love this. Also, there are so many amazing quotes about literature in this. So there's of course tons of quotes about loving books and preferring the company of books over people. And it's just so much fun. And the romance is super, super cute. And there's actually another one in this series, and I'm really excited to get to it. It's called like the League of Women Witches, or the League of, I don't know. I can't think of it right now. I'll put it right here. But the covers are amazing, and that's actually what immediately like drew me to this book. But it was well worth the buy, and I'm super glad that I read it. And the next book, guys, I know some of you are probably so tired of hearing about this book, especially if you're not a romance reader. But this is by far probably my new favorite romance. I'm hesitant to say that it tops The Hating Game, because that book to me is really kind of rom-com top tier for me. I'm a huge Enemies to Lovers fan, and I just felt like I'm a big like office romance fan, and that book just had so much going for it that was right up my alley, and this did too. And I kind of feel some type of way about it, because I just didn't know that anything would ever be able to top that book for me. And I really think Emily Henry did it with this one. This book follows Nora, and she is a literary agent, and she ends up going to this small town with her sister for like a sister's getaway trip. And while she is there, she goes to a coffee shop, and she ends up running into kind of a enemy from the publishing industry that she just did not hit it off well with the first time that they met. And they kind of end up getting wrapped up into, again, kind of like a mutual mission. They end up working pretty closely together, and of course, romance ensues. The banter in this is top tier. Emily Henry is definitely the most consistent romance author that I've ever read. She has become an auto-buy author for me, like no doubt. I actually already have a tattoo in mind that is going to be inspired by this book, because I just so deeply related to Nora's character for a few different reasons. And I'm not going to bore you with them, but I so deeply related to her character, and I think that that's part of why this book hit so good for me. But the tattoo is kind of related to Nora's character, and I cannot wait to get it and show you guys what it is. Okay, so the next two romances, I actually finished both of them the week that I was out with COVID. And so I'm just giving that disclaimer because I'm not for sure if maybe that tainted my view. This first one is a little bit of a disappointment for me. It was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. And I have so many friends that this is like their absolute favorite romance of all time, and people that I actually have a lot in common with their tastes, typically when it comes to romance. And I just really, really didn't like it. And I hate that because I just hate talking bad about books that other people really loved. But I guess that's what makes the book community so awesome, right? Diversity in opinion. So I am going to tell you why I did not like this book. But first, this follows Macy, and she is a nurse, and she is currently like planning her wedding to her fiance, and life is just kind of crazy for her at the moment whenever she runs into an old childhood friend named Elliot, who was her best friend growing up. And they haven't spoken in 10 years, and they run into each other, and very quickly you figure out that something went awry in their friendship, and that there's a big reason why they haven't spoken in so long. And so it's told through dual timelines, present and then past, like following their friendship growing up. Macy deals with some major emotional, we'll say trauma. I guess trauma would probably be the best word to describe it, that she deals with in this book. It's kind of a really main focus of the book. And the biggest reason why I feel like this book didn't hit for me was I kind of felt like Macy's character was a little immature. It just felt like a little frustratingly immature at times, like being inside of her head. And especially when it came to her friendship and her romance with Elliot. And then the kind of plot twist at the end, like when you finally figure out why they hadn't spoken in so long, it felt pretty unrealistic to me, because you had Elliot, who was so caring and gentle and wise. He was not immature by any means. He wasn't immature when they were younger or currently. He actually ticks a lot of my boxes for a male love interest, but it just, the character that he was throughout the entire book, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to ruin it for anybody who's going to read it, but his character that they built throughout the entire book did not match for me with the twist at the end. I think that really, really threw me off, and it kind of ruined it for me. All the good things that I was holding on to, in spite of Macy's character being a little bit too annoying, to be quite frank. For me, I was trying to hold on to some of the good things, because like there is a lot of good in this book, but that did it for me. Like I said, it's really hard to talk about it without ruining it or spoiling it. If you have read it, then maybe you know what I'm talking about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this book, so let me know down below. And the last book that I read that was a romance this month was Hook, Line, and Sinker. I also finished this while I was sick, and this one was just fine. I absolutely loved It Happened One Summer, and so I was really excited about this. Sorry if y'all can hear my dog barking. She is outside, but she's very loud, so I don't know if you might be able to hear her. Please ignore. I really loved It Happened One Summer, and I actually kind of preferred the sister's character, who is the main character in this, over Piper from It Happened One Summer. I resonated with Hannah a little bit more. Her love for music is definitely something that speaks to me, because it's probably my second biggest passion next to reading, and I love vinyl, and so there was so much that I had in common with Hannah, and so I was really looking forward to reading this. But there was just something, you know how sometimes there's just, you can't even quite put your finger on it? That's how it was for me. It was just fine. There wasn't anything that really stood out to me. There wasn't anything like extra amazing about it. It was just a good romance. There wasn't necessarily anything wrong with it. It just didn't hit, and that's what it is. Okay, and so now we are at our mystery thriller portion of the video, and the first one that I finished this month was The Night Swim by Megan Golden, and I really enjoyed this one. This one follows Rachel, who is a true crime podcaster, and she's kind of made a name for herself. She's pretty famous, and one day when she is on her way to this town to cover a trial of a rapist, she stops at a gas station and somebody recognizes her, which is a little bit less common, I think, because she's a podcaster, so a lot of people don't necessarily know her face. So she's automatically kind of off-put by it, and she goes out to her car, and there is a note underneath her windshield wiper. It's essentially asking her for help to solve the murder of the note's author's sister, who passed away like many years prior. I think it was in 1992. And she's essentially begging for her help to solve the murder because it was deemed a drowning. She does not think that it was a drowning. She thinks that it was a murder. And so you kind of get like, you're covering the case, the trial, and then you're also kind of following Rachel's journey to try to figure out and help this person figure out what happened to her sister. And it was really, really fast paced. I felt like it was really well written. It is a very much giving A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. If you enjoyed those books, I really think you will enjoy this book because it is told between like regular narrative, but then also through podcast episodes. And that's how the second book in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series is told. Very much the same kind of concept. I did see the twist coming, so I was a little underwhelmed by it, but that doesn't mean that it was bad by any means. Like, I still really, really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend it. Another thing I will say about this too is that obviously there's a trigger warning for sexual assault in this, and it is handled really well. I felt like it was talked about in a very respectful way towards victims, and it was talked about in a way that got a message across that I feel like Megan was trying to get across when it comes to kind of victims being silenced and just the rhetoric around sexual assault victims being unbelieved. It was very, very well done, and I felt like it was handled very well. So that is a definite plus for this one. If you are looking for a fast-paced thriller, I'd definitely pick it up. Okay, and the next thriller that I finished was Second Chance by James Patterson. This is the second book in the Real Murder Women's Club. Is that what it's called? Hold, please. The Women's Murder Club. And this is the second book, and I absolutely adored the first one. It was no different for the second one. James Patterson's writing in this series is so good, and the chapters are like crazy short. His writing is super engaging. The thing that I love the most about this series so far is the mysteries are fun and they're engaging, and he always does a good job of making you want to know what's going to happen next. But the thing that I love the most about this series is the women. So this series follows 4 different women. You have a district attorney, a medical examiner, a crime reporter, and then an investigator. And in the first one, you kind of see them, how their story comes together to create this club where they all bring their own expertise from their fields to help the investigator figure out the case. And what I really loved about this one is it built so well on the friendship that was formed in the first one, and I'm just loving the friendship. I'm loving the female power. He's just doing a really good job, which is kind of surprising to me. A guy writing female friendship feels like it would feel forced, or it might be not super great, but I feel like James Patterson does a really great job, and all the women are fascinating, and I love how smart they are. So if you're looking for like a major backlist, like these are major backlists. This one was published in 2002, so these are like 20 plus years old, but they're really good, and like I said, they're super fast read. I'm definitely going to continue the series, and I think he's still writing them. I'm pretty sure like the 22nd one maybe was just released, but I'm excited to continue the series. So if you're looking for a good backlist title, highly recommend. Okay, and the next and last mystery that I read is a new favorite, and I'm so excited to continue this series as well. And it was The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This book was all the coziness that I needed. I read this while I was out with COVID, and it made my heart so happy. This book follows 4 different friends who all live in the same retirement village, and they all love true crime. They get together every Thursday to go over true crime cases and give their theories, give their opinions. One day they find themselves wrapped up in a real life murder, and they help the lead investigators solve the case, and the characters are just so quirky. I have never wanted to be 4 senior citizens' best friends more than I did while reading this book. And the way that Richard Osman speaks to the feelings of aging that these people feel, and honestly feelings of aging and feeling useless, are just so good. I think if you're a cozy mystery fan, I actually would consider this a cozy mystery. It doesn't exactly meet some of the tropes that are typically found in things that are considered cozy mysteries, but I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to pick up the next one. Okay, and so the next and final book that I finished in the month of May is a fantasy romance, and it is the Zodiac Academy. And this book is absolutely everywhere. If you are on any form of Book Talk, Bookstagram, BookTube, anything book related, I don't know how you haven't seen something about this series. So again, I am so sad to inform you that this was just not for me. I definitely think it's just a preference thing. This book is following a set of twins, and they end up finding out from kind of a stranger that comes into their life that they actually are fae, and they are part of a world called Solaria, and that they have to come to this academy where they will learn more about their powers, and they have to go there in order to inherit the inheritance that was left to them by their parents. They were adopted, and so they didn't know their parents, but their parents have passed and left them a huge inheritance. But in order to get the inheritance, they have to go and finish academy. This definitely gives Harry Potter vibes. I get why people say that. They go to this academy and they get sorted into not houses, but I can't remember what they call them. And they're the houses are based on elements. So I think my biggest mistake going into this was not knowing enough about the book itself. So I love a good fantasy romance, but this is actually considered what is called a bully romance, and I think I just learned that that's not for me. Part of the plot, and this is not a spoiler, but part of the plot is that these twins are actually, because their parents were king and queen of Solaria, they actually are supposed to ascend to the throne, and in their place, while they have lived in the real world, away from Solaria, there have been 4 different families that have taken over the throne in their absence. And so there are 4 different heirs to the throne that also go to this academy that are the same age, around the same age as them. So the 4 heirs are not happy about them obviously coming to ruin the party. They bully the twins, but these bullies are the potential love interests. There's some connections happening in this book. And I think I just realized that that's not for me. And a couple of other things to keep in mind about this book is the writing definitely is written like fan fiction. It reads like fan fiction, which wasn't a problem for me at all. It didn't bother me, but to some people it might bother them. It's definitely not the most beautiful literary work, but it really wasn't. That wasn't a problem for me. I didn't necessarily feel like the world building, at least in the first one, was super well explained. Those are just my thoughts. It is super popular, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, you might pick it up because a lot of people love it. It just wasn't for me. Okay, and so the last 2 books that I'm going to talk about were actually DNFs, and I was really disappointed by both of them because I had high hopes for both of them. But the first one I actually don't even physically have anymore because I did decide to unhaul it, and that was Book of Night by Holly Black. I was really sad about this. I haven't ever read a Holly Black book, and so maybe that was where I went wrong. I probably shouldn't have started with her adult debut, but this book, I struggled. I got to 120 pages, or no, I'm sorry, I got even further than that. I got to, like, I think it was 165 when I actually finally decided to DNF it. I still felt like I had no real idea what was going on. And honestly, I was not rooting for our main character at all. I didn't feel connected with her. I decided that I might just put it down and pick it up in the fall because it definitely gives creepy vibes. But I decided that if I read 165 pages of it and I didn't like it that much, then I'm probably not gonna like it in the fall either. So anyway, so I just decided to unhaul it. I ended up selling it on Pango, and I'm moving forward. I'm not giving it any more thought. Okay, so the last book that I'm going to talk about is Dating Dr. Dill, and this was another DNF for me. Unfortunately, I really thought I was going to like it. It's a rom-com, check mark. It's enemies to lovers, check mark. So it had a lot going for it going in for me, and it just really fell flat. So this book follows Karina, and she is talking to her dad and her sister one day when she finds out that the home that they've grown up in, that her mom passed away in, is going to be sold because her dad is retiring and he's moving. And she's really upset and distraught about this, and she wants to buy the house from him, but she cannot because she does not have the capital. And so she decides that the only way to do it is going to be to get the money from her dad that her dad has saved up for her wedding. And so she decides, I gotta get a fiance. And then in comes Dr. Prem, and he is in a similar predicament where he is looking to open a clinic for children, and he needs money, he needs investors, but he's still a little bit shy of his goal. And so he also is looking for some capital from his parents. And one night they meet at a bar, and it's a completely natural meeting, and they have some of the best conversation that either of them have ever had. And they find themselves in kind of a makeout session, and something happens, and Dr. Prem he has to leave, and he leaves Karina in kind of a precarious situation, if you will, and that really upsets her. Fast forward a couple of days, she is with her sister at this talk show, Dr. Dill, and at the talk show is a doctor that's coming in to talk about cardiovascular health for women. And so when he walks onto the stage at the television show, Karina is immediately enraged because the last time she saw this man, they were making out, and he left her high and dry in a very precarious situation. And while live streaming the television show, she ends up kind of attacking Dr. Prem. And so obviously it's recorded. But the biggest reason why I had to DNF this is, first of all, it was not engaging to me. I was not sucked in, and I really wasn't rooting for either one of our characters. But the biggest thing for me was Karina's character really made me mad. At the show, when she kind of freaks out on Prem, she is yelling at him because he left her in this situation, and he's a liar because he was telling her all of these things and she thinks that they were lies, and that she was kind of led to believe that he believes in love, but he actually doesn't believe in love. She's screaming at him, and then she proceeds to throw actually, it's the next day that this is happening. It's coming back to me now. It's the next day that this is happening. And she throws her Pedialyte, because she's hungover, at him on live television. And it just felt super over the top. I just kind of feel like if you are in your 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and you go out on a date, a guy that you really have a connection with ends up being a jerk, and you feel like he left you high and dry. I just felt like the degree to which she was angry with him felt very unrealistic, and it kind of, in my opinion, played a little bit into this idea that women and their emotions can be irrational, if that makes sense. I don't know. There was just something about the way that it was written that didn't sit right with me. I just wish that she would have handled it a little bit more classily. And then, like I said, wasn't engaged at all. So DNF this, and that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Okay, guys, and that is all the books that I picked up in the month of May. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know what your favorite book of May was, and I hope that in the future you will choose coziness over chaos, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!